Hello, Jamie and Ash. Thank you for joining me today. Jamie, we've met already for the first interview of Coffee and Pens, but now it's the first time we'll have a talk with each other for the podcast as well. So can you start with a little introduction of yourself, please?
No, sure. And thank you so much for having us. I'm super
Yes,
excited to
thank you
sit
for
down and talk
having us.
today. So I'll kick things off. My name is Jamie Russo. I'm a writer based in Brooklyn, New York. I'm the author of a book called The Underdog Paradox, and incredibly excited today to share a little bit of the story behind the latest project that Ash and I have been working on, a new book, a children's book called If Creators Are Like Wizards. So incredibly excited to sit down, share a little bit more about that and dive in soon.
All right, thank you, Jamie.
Right.
First time talking to Ash. Ash, how are you? Can you introduce
How are
yourself
you?
as well?
Of course. So my name is Ash Lamb. I'm an illustrator based in Barcelona, Spain. And a few months ago, in fact, last summer, I discovered Jack's work, Jack Butcher, and he completely changed my life. I realized that you could leverage your skills and productize yourself. And I've been building an audience since then. And here I am in a podcast with you too.
All right, that's a great story. How did you guys meet, Jamie?
Oh man, I mean, unsurprisingly, Twitter, right? I think a lot of us have met on Twitter this past year.
Yeah.
So I met Ash through Twitter probably 6 months ago, discovered his work through the Visualized Value community. I can't recall, Ash, exactly what the first piece of work was that turned me on to you, but I do remember.
I do remember.
You remember? Go for it then.
The hand holding the pencil.
Yeah. Yeah, so actually a piece of work that'll be featured in our book was something that kind of like kicked off conversations in the DMs. What I will say though is before I reached out to Ash, the first piece of work that I do remember was that piece that you had put together for Jack and Celia when they had their first
the
child.
portrait.
I thought that was incredibly cool and like really selfless. So yeah, 6 months ago, I think Ash had like less than 100 followers at the point in time.
Yeah.
And I just reached out and I was like, hey, absolutely love your work. Like would love to do something together. And that's what turned into kind of our first Twitter thread that we co-authored, and everything's been going on from there.
All right, that's cool. So you met 6 months ago. That's when you already had the idea to work together.
Yeah.
And then at what point in time did you decide to create this book?
So Jamie and I decided to collaborate on this thread. And at first we didn't really know what to do it about. And Jamie had this great idea of creating a thread about simplifying the creative process. So nowadays we have all these different tools. We have computers, Notion, Evernote, all these. We have a huge amount of tools. And sometimes we forget about keeping things simple and just using a pencil and a piece of paper, and we get caught up in all these different tools, and it makes everything incredibly complicated. So Jamie had the great idea of making a thread about the importance of keeping your creative process simple and paring things down to the essentials. So, we worked on this thread and it went really well. I think the thread performed pretty well. We were really happy with the result. And a few months later, Jamie had the idea to turn this thread into a book, into a proper picture book. So obviously, we refined the book and we made it we made the thread 10 times better. And here we are. Now we have a proper picture book, and we're still working on a few details, but I would say the book is 95% finished. It's funny how we went from a simple thread to a picture book in a few months. Crazy.
Yeah, I've been like fiddling with this idea of the concept. I call it like the MVB, minimum viable book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's kind of like a little thing that I pull from like my background in product management and product development. I've always been really interested in like developing creative constraints around a new book structure, a new book format. And so our like MVB is kind of 20 pages or less. On each page, it's 280 characters or less. And it's blending like Ash's really incredible talent for illustration with colorful, flavorful, fun, like words and language.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like I've produced a number of these books like for myself, for friends and family, but have never actually taken the process of like, going through the process of leveraging print on demand to distribute these worldwide. And that's what I'm really excited to do with Ash, is kind of take that idea or concept of that kind of MVB and share it with the world.
Cool. So when I look at the book, I had a little preview, and I see lots of Ash's beautiful drawings and then your kind of poetic words. And I don't want to undervalue what you wrote, Jamie, but I wonder how the time division is between what you write and the amount of time that Ash spends creating, designing, illustrating all of these images.
Yeah. Well, I would say when we got into this project, we didn't know how the time was probably going to be divided between the two of us. And quite selfishly, I think Ash has been doing a ton of the heavy lifting and shouldering, especially over the last 2 or 3 weeks or so. We've been going through like layout and design and cover and all of that. It's been so much work on Ash. So this book, I don't know if it was my idea, but this would be absolutely nowhere without the amazing work of Ash. And he's 10x the talent that I am, and this book is just a small piece of me. So incredibly grateful.
You're too kind, Jamie.
Yeah.
Your words truly helped me to do my best. Sometimes without a guidance, it's not possible to create a meaningful illustration.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, I've had a lot of fun with this. And I think like what I hope to be able to do, at least with Ash, is kind of share a little bit of that creative process. I'd love to see Ash produce more of these books himself on his own someday. I'd love to do other collaborative projects like this with other creators, because sometimes some of the hardest pieces of this are simply like knowing where to go to leverage print on demand services and knowing how to like go through the process of doing layout and editing and all of that. Sometimes that's like the biggest hurdle from getting someone from producing a Twitter thread to like publishing a book. But it's a simple process, and I'd love to share it with others.
Yeah, I think it's right about knowing these details about how to administrate everything. But also something we talked about recently, Jamie, is showing the belief in someone. Because now you said Ash is maybe 10 times as skillful as you are, but he said, I wouldn't be here without you. And what's the biggest thing that you did is maybe just showing you believe in him. Yeah,
I think there's like this special idea. I'm sure we've all heard about like the unbundling of like Reddit when it comes to all these little micro communities that we're seeing prop up around the internet. Like I think that one of the things I've always described to for the last year or two is kind of this idea of like unbundling of venture capital. I read this article by KP from over at On Deck a couple of years ago, and it's this idea of like the unbundling of venture capital. Within venture, you've got the money, so that's the venture capital. You've got the belief, that's the belief capital. You've got this idea of like socially, the social capital, who you're friends with and who you collaborate with and so forth. And I think there's something really, really special there. So I don't think, like, the beautiful thing about the creator economy is most of us have the ability to just create things without needing money to do it, right? Like we have the skills. We have the skills. So like the biggest hurdles for us are like that belief capital and that social capital that enable us to build what we build. The social capital is like, you're following your audience and so on. The belief capital is me believing in Ash, Ash believing in me, and vice versa. And so I think it's a really powerful concept I want to share with others.
Well, I couldn't agree more with Jamie. At the end of the day, nowadays, we can't build anything without, well, obviously we need money, but we have enough free tools at our disposal, and we can build almost anything. And we need people to believe in us and to show us love, and to maybe follow us or tell us when they like our work, so it's important to know that people are rooting for you.
Right, that's amazing, Ash, that you've received all this support from Jamie, and I think it's a beautiful opportunity for the two of you having come together through Twitter and then working together on a project that's so beautiful and that may lead to other future projects as well. Because I think Ash, this has already given you other opportunities, right, in these types of collaborations.
Ash has been on a roll. Ash, I don't know if that's a lead, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the other stuff that you've been working on.
So as you've seen, I've been working on this poster with Jamie and Janet. So Jamie had this idea of creating a poster.
This was Justin.
Justin Nikolai. He had this great idea of creating a poster about the creator economy. And he wrote this fabulous manifesto, about, all these concepts, abstract concepts. So we made a poster to visualize all these ideas. And we've been working on this poster for a month or 2 months. It's been a pretty long project. It's been challenging. It's been pretty challenging, but we finally launched the poster. And at the last minute, we decided to mint the poster and create an NFT, which has been a ride. It has been a blast because it's my first ever NFT. I was a bit skeptical, to be honest. I didn't really trust the industry. And now I know that it more or less works, that it's possible to sell an NFT without having Justin has a huge audience and Janice also, but I don't know, it's an experience, going from zero to selling an NFT, and can't wait to see where this goes. And we want to make more posters in the future. So this is the first edition. Maybe in the future we'll create new editions of the Creator Manifesto with different illustrators. We'll see. This is only the start.
I loved how that came together, and I think it's beautiful to see in in the poster that you created how your style and Janus's style come together. And
Yeah.
if you're familiar with the two of you, I think it's very easy to recognize which piece you worked on and which piece he worked on. And so that's just amazing. And going a bit off topic, but do you think, Jamie, that maybe NFTs is something writers and authors could leverage somehow as well?
I'm absolutely stoked to just see where this goes. I think that I don't want to like over dramatize this, but like we all hear within our little corner of the internet, like this being kind of a renaissance of some sorts that we're living in right now. And I couldn't agree with that any further. It's so cool to just see new ways that artists are capable of monetizing their work to build communities. And the thing that I'm most excited about, or the thing that gets me the most jazzed about it, is not that an artist can go and earn like a healthy living from their work in a way that they have never been able to do before. But what I'm now seeing through that community, which is they're taking that money and they're feeding it back into the art community. This doesn't just happen in a vacuum where, you know, one artist or a couple of artists get rich and don't share their wealth. Like, it's literally building this massive art community and movement that is now fueling something with a ton of energy. And so that's really the most exciting thing to me. It's great that people are making a lot of money, but let's also not forget that, you know, despite these large numbers, like this money is actually just being fed back into the community.
Yeah, it's beautiful. How do you feel about this, Ash?
Couldn't agree more. It's amazing because, for example, well, Jamie has been buying NFTs from Aaron and Janice, right?
Yeah, well, I'm amassing a small collection as we speak.
Yeah, but it's amazing to see you, you know, to see you buy, like to see you spend $700 on a piece of art from a creator that you like and that you admire. It's amazing. Same with Janice. I mean, he's buying pieces from Aaron and vice versa, and Jack has been buying tons of NFTs from all these unknown artists. So he's supporting people that haven't got a large following. It's great. I mean, super excited. I can't wait to see where this new technology goes. And I feel tempted to start working on an NFT project, you know, like my own version of the board, what's it called? Board Ape Club. Or
oh yeah, Club.
I can't remember the name, but I mean, it's amazing. It's fascinating.
Yeah, makes me want to switch from writing to designing
go
right away.
But
anyway, back to the book.
Our time will come. Okay. I want to come back to that for a second. Yeah, I'm incredibly excited to see what can be done with online writing, NFTs. There's a huge opportunity there that will eventually have some sort of a monetization model that works really, really well. I know there's already some folks that are doing some really cool things. But I think that digital art and that community has kind of found their product market fit, so to say. The jury's still out on like writing and essays and long. You know, I've seen some people like publishing decentralized books and stuff like that, but I don't think it's really I don't think it's really as big or known yet as it is in the kind of like digital art community. As it is in the writing community. So I'm interested to see like what happens over the next couple of years, because there'll be a moment for sure.
Yeah, I've seen a few things happening. So for one, there's Quora, who's now creating a monetization program. I've seen Nicholas Cole's quite excited about this because, of course, Quora's audience is a lot bigger than Medium's, for example. And then there's like another platform which is going to be similar to Medium, but works out of BitCloud, which is Cloud. Anyway, as you said, Jamie, our time as writers will come, and for now, there's still good ways to make money from books, isn't it? So
definitely.
Speaking about that, with your book, I've seen many of the designs of the illustrations, and I've seen your like lines of poetry or of words on Twitter. But until recently, I've never seen them connected and with reference to the book. Is that on my part, or have you not been doing a lot of like advertising, marketing around this book up till now?
Yeah, I mean, the promotion has been like pretty minimal so far. So I think there's a little bit of work that Ash and I have to do on that front in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Definitely.
But I think what Ash and I wanted to do was we wanted to make sure that the final product was ready before we really locked ourselves into that launch date. So we had a tentative launch date of September 15th. There were a couple of things that we needed to finish before ensuring that we would be good to go and greenlight that date. I think by now we're pretty confident that we'll hit that. So I think that's been maybe like something that's been holding us back from going all out on our marketing campaign, but duly noted.
We don't want to be too salesy as well. we don't want to persuade people to buy the book or force people to buy the book or make people feel guilty if they don't buy the book. We want this to be something natural and fun and see where it goes. We'll see.
Okay. That's good because, you don't want to push people too much.
Yeah.
But speaking of selling this book anyway, who's your target audience for this book?
Good question. Well, it's tricky, because I don't like it's true, it's a picture book, but it's not, I don't think it's a children's book. It's a picture book. So Jamie's right. I think this book is a great fit for creators who have children. But I think both adults and even teenagers and very young children can enjoy the book. So it depends on the person.
Okay, perfect. I see you smiling, Jamie. Do you agree? Is there anything? Of course, you agree.
Yeah, no,
together, right?
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, it's interesting because when Ash and I wrote the piece, we wrote it initially for the Twitter audience, right? So there's, you can imagine who our target audience was when we initially penned the piece. It was for our community. It was to inspire others to kind of disconnect and think a little bit about what they could do with a pen and paper. That said, after compiling this into a book, I think we realized this is kind of a cool piece of art that creators can enjoy, but their children might enjoy it even more. And so we noticed that through the pre-launch that we hosted a couple of weeks ago, that a lot of the comments all across social media were, "Oh, I can't wait to buy this and read it to my son or my daughter."
Yeah.
And that wasn't something that we realized until we had kind of shared a preview of it. So I think coming back to the concept of this minimum viable book, sometimes authors spend months, years, over a decade. Kel, I don't know who you've spoken to on your podcast and interviewed, but I have people who have told me, "Oh yeah, I've been working on a book for 20 years." Well, sometimes, I mean, whatever works for the right person, but I think through this process of building something small, sharing about the journey in public, it's enabled us to get a better understanding of who our target audience is here. And so even though, Ash and I really wanted to write this for creators, it might be a really cool piece for their kids.
I agree.
So what you're actually doing with this book, if I'm right, is you're kind of testing the market. It's a product test. So see how the sales of this book go and see if there's a market for this to create more similar kind of books in the future.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is that
you might be seeing some of the future there.
Yes.
I mean, it is. It's our first creative piece together, so
it's an experiment.
Is that something, that concept of a minimum viable book, something that you think works across all genres?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think so.
I think for testing ideas, but I mean, I've created a collection of these books at this point that I have had no interest in selling. I've used it for poetry. I've used it for short fiction. I've used it for, I've taken some of my own favorite threads written by others and turned them into books that I've published for myself to just have a collection of. I'm someone who I love reading, and I love having a collection of ideas sitting there on my shelf that I know are just reminders. You sometimes don't even need to open a book to just be reminded of the idea there. And so I think this can transcend a lot of different genres, but again, kind of coming back to some of the creative constraints that Ash and I had, we wanted it to be 20 pages or less. We wanted each page to be 280 characters or less, something that can fit into a kind of thread. And that's the concept that we've got.
Right, beautiful. So these books that you print out yourself, I think it's pretty interesting. So you made them all by yourself, or did you collaborate with others as well?
So these have all been personal pieces. For early drafts of some books, especially hardcover, I will simply use Shutterfly to take 20 images that I might create on Canva and combine them into a physical book to just look and feel and see what it's like in your hands. That's something that is very emotional in nature, just feeling the story almost in your hands. So I've been using Shutterfly. They offer this service to create these 6x6 inch books for $10 or less, basically. 20 pages. It's all very, very tangible. So it's been something I've been doing. It just wasn't something I ever was interested in going through the process of publishing and sharing with the world until this most recent one with Ash.
Right. So it's kind of a way instead of like printing out your manuscript just on paper, you already kind of print out this manuscript in book format.
Yeah, I mean, anyone can do it.
Yeah.
Anyone can do that.
Yeah, anyone can do that, but not everyone has the idea to do it, because like you said, it's just $10. It's not that expensive to just see what you created on paper and have the real feeling. I think it's a good idea for authors to try this out before they even want to go to publish everything. Of course, you get your book like tested before you start selling it, but I think many writers at that stage are already beyond editing and everything, and it's already too late to make too many changes to the layout and everything.
Exactly.
So that's a hidden tip right there, I think.
It's a great way to test a book before you invest too much money into it. Google has a great option as well to print a book, really cheap, really easy, quick, great option. If you want to fill a book before hiring an editor, or maybe, I don't know, maybe hiring an illustrator, it's a good way to test things quickly and get a feeling. So it's great.
All right, thank you. Speaking of tools, I saw that you used the tool Playbook.com. Is that something that you used from the start, or just for the layout? Can you tell me a bit about the tool?
So Playbook, a funny story. Playbook is a really new startup. It started like a couple years ago when I met the co-founder a year ago, and he's building this awesome product for creatives. It's an alternative to Google Drive, to Dropbox. Cheap, it works really well, and it's visual, and it allows you to build a portfolio without a website. Well, it's a great concept. So it's been really helpful to share the files with Jamie and to work on the prototypes and to design the book. I've used Affinity Publisher. So I had to buy it's my first time ever designing a book. So that was pretty challenging. At first, I thought it would be really easy because, I mean, it's a simple layout, it's not a magazine. Illustration, text, that's it. Every page is almost the same, but oh my goodness, it's hard getting the format right, the color profile, the resolution. It's hard, but you live and you learn. So, it's taken us a bit of extra time to get the book right, but if we ever collaborate again in the future, it'll be easier because now we have a template. So, there's always a first time. So from my point of view, the most challenging part was the layout design.
Yeah, that's funny. That's something I think most authors underestimate, and then they get to the point of the layout design. And I've talked about this in my previous two interviews.
Yeah.
And you know what? I talked to Rob Fitzpatrick the other week, and he does everything in Google Docs. And I think that's even more mind-blowing. That it's just something simple as Google Docs, and then he creates everything right there. But to make this easier, maybe, Ash, is there anything that you learned about creating this layout that can make it easier for other people?
Good question. Well, my first advice, this is a bit controversial, but would be to ditch Adobe and switch to Affinity. I mean, if Adobe ever listens to this podcast, they'll never sponsor me, but it's done now. I mean, Adobe is too expensive. It's too slow. I don't like it anymore. So first step, switch to a simpler software like Rob, He keeps things simple, Google Docs, and that's it. Again, we were using illustration, so it adds an extra layer of difficulty, but I mean, keep things as simple as you can, and watch a tutorial on YouTube as usual, and learn the basics. Stick to the basics. Don't try to be too fancy. Don't add frames and stickers. Just keep things simple. Text, white background, illustration. Copyright page, that was a bit challenging because I know what do you include to the copyright page. So I had to go on Google and download a template, and I think we got it right. But here's the thing, once you do your first book, that's it. Now you have a template, and you can easily duplicate the template and use it for other projects.
Right. Now getting back to some different kind of tips, more interesting maybe for the listeners. Jamie, we talked already the first time, but I didn't ask you for your writing tips at the end, something I have been doing in further interviews. So could you take a second and share your top 3 writing tips?
Yeah, so here's a couple of different ones, hopefully. So one of the things that I have really enjoyed through this creative process, in like working with another illustrator, is like using that as an opportunity to use really fun language. I think this book could have been written in many different ways, but we chose to use very flavorful language that brings the reader along a journey, a lot of metaphors, a lot of different personification to help people kind of put themselves in the shoes of other artists and creatives and illustrators and architects. So I've really enjoyed using a lot of very fun language in this book. It's filled with that. And I think if you're ever working with another artist or illustrator or creative on a collaborative project where you're the one responsible for the words and they're responsible for something else entirely different, I think giving them something to play with is really fun. The second thing that I'll say is it's really, really important to give the artist complete control over the creative process. I have heard from a lot of horror stories from artists friends who have worked with other writers before, like the writer wanting to have creative control over what goes into the pages. And I think that's a terrible experience for both people involved. Over the last 2 weeks, Ash and I have had to like fine tune some of the illustrations so that the bleeds on the page and so that the way that the layout worked was perfect. But at no point have I ever like forced Ash or asked Ash to present something. It's been a very collaborative thing between the two of us. Ash just pushed me to bring in more flavorful language into this fun project. And likewise, like we've been working together to try and get these illustrations right. But I think giving an artist complete control over the creative process is incredibly important. And suffocating them in any way, shape, or form just stifles the end product. So those would be probably two really big ones from this journey that I've taken away that maybe didn't share in the last book.
Okay, yeah, because it was a different process, of course, which the first book was of course non-fiction, more clear writing, and this one is more poetic, right? It's almost poetry if it isn't poetry. And so, as you said, you use a lot of vivid language, a lot of imagery. Are there any tools that you use to find these words, or is it just all from your own thinking?
Yeah, I have. So I've been playing with this idea for the last couple of months. The idea being like, what sort of unconventional advice can we provide to creators that maybe they've never like seen or thought about before, right? So if you are an artist, what does that turn your paintbrush into, right? Like, what are some cool, fun metaphors that we can use to describe that brush? Or, if you're an orator, like, what are some fun and interesting and beautiful things about speech? And how can we blend that beauty into words and translate that to others? So a lot of it has been like making odd or interesting connections that maybe haven't been made previously, and bringing those into very, very short prose that doesn't overemphasize like any particular facet of the language other than just like the pure idea. So it's very short, very concise, and in some ways like poetic, but wasn't designed from the get-go to be poetry. Instead, just like a very fun experience for a reader.
And you've been testing a lot of these on Twitter, so you've been sharing many of these metaphors as separate tweets. Do you think that influenced much of the metaphors, and how many of those metaphors maybe made it into the book, and like which percentage didn't make it?
Yeah, I mean, so I try to publish like at least one idea on Twitter every single day, and someday I do hope to like go back to a lot of that content and illustrate it myself. But right now, like I've just been picking and choosing a few of those each week and curating them for my newsletter, and then curating a few of those into this book. So I think of my creative process as like Twitter is my idea refinery. It's like the initial like raw idea that comes out of, I do a lot of my writing with 2 thumbs, which is probably bad, but a lot of my ideas are written in 2 thumbs and on my phone. I take a lot of those ideas at the end of the week, I curate them and I put them into my newsletter GoodNote. So that's like round 1. I get feedback from Twitter and I take my favorite ones and I put them into a newsletter. And then I take some of those ideas from the newsletter and I curate them and I put them on my website. And then I take some of those from my website and I put them into books. So it's multiple rounds of editing that these kind of ideas go through just through my creative writing process.
And at the end of this process, did you pass on these lines to Ash, or at any point did Ash also contribute to the language, to the words of this book?
So so Jamie did contribute on the illustrations, and I did contribute a little bit on the writing as well. So it's good to to switch roles every once in a while and to share different ideas. So whenever Jamie had an idea for an illustration, he told me, and vice versa. So I would highly recommend anyone to, to not be in a pigeonhole, and to, help the writer, and vice versa. It's good to switch roles and to collaborate.
Right, thank you.
Because if you don't share your opinion, you aren't collaborating in the end.
It makes the end work so much better. Like I would probably say Ash is his harshest critic. I am my harshest critic. But at the end of the day, like there are gaps that we see in our own work that someone else with a relaxed eye has the ability to kind of come in and like help folks see. So there were moments on this book where like Ash was working late at night and like handing something off to me, and I was like, there's like one little thing there that like needs to be edited. Like he needed like an additional eye on that. And likewise, when we were early on in the creative writing process, we were collaborating in a Google Doc. Like Ash was very helpful in adding comments and sections and saying, oh, you should build this out more, or maybe we should add a page about this, or so on. So it's very much like we're both our own harshest critics, but sometimes we even miss some simple things.
Right. Is there anything else you learned from working together, like including the time difference and everything?
Well, I would say that adding constraints to the craft is always a good thing, even when you're collaborating with someone else. So keeping things as simple as you can from the start and being a minimalist. So as you can see, we did add constraints, illustrations, almost all of them have a pencil, text the same, 280 characters or less. So and all the pages are the same. So adding constraints makes the whole process 10 times easier, because we know what we're doing. We don't have to be discussing, oh, well, what should we do in this page? Should I make the illustration full page? Should I make it that way? But it's, making things clear from the start.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Anything else you would add, Jamie?
Well, I think something that's been really neat and interesting is just how two people can collaborate so asynchronously. This is only the second time that I've been able to sit on a phone call with Ash.
Wow.
We use tools ourselves. Like, even though this book is about pen and paper, we use technology ourselves to make this happen. Hopefully at some point Ash can share some of the behind the scenes, because I know he has really great pencil illustrations that go along with some of these stories. But so it did start from the heart, and it started with a low-tech solution, but we've been collaborating through DMs, we've been collaborating through Google Docs, we've been collaborating through Telegram, we've been collaborating through Playbook, we've been very asynchronously communicating with one another for the last month or so now at this point around this project. And it's just cool to see like one person hand off a piece of work, go to bed, wake up, and it being taken to the next stage.
Definitely.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I can actually see a benefit there of living in different time zones. So when one goes to sleep, the other's almost going to wake up and then can immediately start working on it. And then when you wake up the next day, there's been progress. And in such a way, definitely when you're working on two different sides of the book, so one's doing the writing, one's doing the illustrations, there's going to be almost 24/7 progress. So that's pretty cool.
Sometimes video calls slow down the whole process. People love, I really enjoy video calls and meeting the other person and having a chat with them, but sometimes, more often than not, they slow the whole process. When I used to work at an agency, we spent hours and hours jumping on Zoom calls, and we never talked about anything. We just wasted time and time. The same with the poster. I only had like 2 calls with Justin and Janice. Everything else just Slack, DMs, Google Drive, Playbook, and that's it. Keeping the process simple. Sometimes you don't need to jump on a call every day. You just keep things easy.
Yeah, because when you sit face to face, and even though there's like a laptop and a camera and everything in between, it's so easy to start talking about personal things and how's your life, and we had to talk about the book. There's like 5 minutes left to start talking about it. So I think that's great that you've been able to leverage all these online tools to do everything asynchronously. And another thing I picked up from Jamie that you just said a few minutes ago is that Ash, you made so you started many visuals on pen and paper.
Yes, I did.
Is that
I always do?
You always do. All right, so cool. So what I want to go to is Is that one of like the tips that you would give starting designers or illustrators? And what else would you tell them to do?
So again, my number one tip, and I can't stress this enough, is to add constraints. I learned this from Jack and from Aaron and from Janice even. Keep things simple. I must add more constraints myself because I'm using way too many colors, too many shades, and that's a good thing, but I would like to streamline stuff and keep things simple. So the trick that I see very few people applying is to add constraints, like as many constraints as you can, like using only one color or two colors, always using the same size. Look, I always sketch my stuff on this notepads. I never use a notebook. I never use a normal paper sheet. I always use these tiny notepads because they have a constraint. It's always the same size. It's square and it's tiny, and I can't spend hours, working on the details. Just have to focus on the essentials. So I mean, it's almost magic. Like as soon as you add constraints, your level, you step up to the next level. And Jack has done a phenomenal job at adding constraints, black and white. Aaron as well, Jamie as well. He's great at keeping things simple, and I can always recognize his style on Twitter without even looking at his profile picture, because he writes in this poetic way. He always keeps things pretty short, and it's amazing. I mean, it's great technique.
Constraints is something that every creative, every artist, what you work with, illustrations about words, should leverage. I think it's underused in writing, putting constraints on yourself. How do you feel about that, Jamie? Because you kind of do put those constraints on much of your writing.
Yeah, I'm constantly working on incorporating more and more. I mean, a good example would just be Shakespeare, right? Like the Shakespearean sonnet. It's like there's a lot of creative freedom within that format, but at the end of the day, like same structure, same flow, same rhythm, same, like you can expect, scene A, scene B, scene C as you go through the entire play. So I think there definitely are some really fantastic artists that have leveraged it to their ability in the past. Great writers, and yeah, it's something I keep working on. It's tough.
Yeah,
it's tough. It is.
It's something that got a bit lost, isn't it? Because before there were these sonnets, and then there were other kinds of poetic structures, and I think there were about 5 to 10 that were pretty famous. And now you just don't see those kind of things anymore. Everyone's just free to write what they think, and there's a lot of long form essays and a lot of books, and then there's not as much artist in the writer anymore, or maybe I just don't see it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I still love poetry. A good example would be like the haiku. I'm sure we see a lot of writers on Twitter that, since it does fit in the 280 character limit. So and then there's like other delineations of haikus as well, like collaborative writing in poetry, collaborative haikus where people string together haikus to form longer form pieces. I think 100 haikus counts as like a raiku or something like that. There's all these terms. I'm less familiar with them. Was exploring them earlier last year, but yeah, I mean, there's some really good formats out there that I think the art has just been a little bit lost in recent years, because we live in this area of Twitter where it's very much driven by like James Clear, David Perel, Dickie Bush. They've all got these formats, which those have constraints in themselves as well. Like the Atomic Essay is a really, really good example, but it's kind of our area of the world that we live in, or like our corner of the internet is very different from some other corners where there are a lot more constraints in poetic use of language. So it's just going out and finding those influences.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, we've almost come to the end. There's always one question I ask before we go. You kind of answered it already, Ash, but I'm going to have a try anyway. What's your secret?
My secret?
Yeah.
Good question. My secret for what? I mean, I don't want to be too repetitive, but I would say to add constraints.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I thought.
I mean, I became a minimalist a year ago or 2 years ago. And becoming are you guys familiar with minimalism?
Yeah.
As a lifestyle, I mean, it has completely changed my life, and I'm still working on it. But I mean, it's amazing the power of simplicity and of keeping things as simple as you possibly can, getting rid of stuff that you aren't using. I mean, not only you become happier, but you become more productive. And I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I'm so glad I discovered minimalism. And it's not only about getting rid of furniture and throwing away old stuff. You can also apply minimalism to your craft, to your website. your Twitter bio, to your whole strategy, content strategy. Nowadays, people make stuff really complicated. You know, they have these really complex Twitter bios with likes, with links. I'm working on 26 different projects, this and that. But what if we kept things simple and we focused on the essentials? I mean, that's what I would say. That's my secret.
Okay, cool. So minimalism, keeping everything simple, use your constraints. I think it fits nicely together, this lifestyle of keeping things simple and the design style of keeping things simple. Jamie, I can't remember if I asked you the first time round what your secret was. Here I wrote down the first time that your secret is having those close friends, like a good group of people that back you up. Is that something you stand behind still, or is there something else that you think is more important?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really powerful thing. We were talking about belief capital earlier. I think that's a really powerful thing. I would maybe summarize it slightly differently this time too. It's like, just go out there and have fun. Like I really love using Twitter as a bit of a playground. And I think in doing so, it introduces you to some other people that are interested in having fun with you. And so for me, like constantly like having fun, using Twitter as a playground, searching for that serendipitous moment where you never know which two atoms are going to collide, but when they do, it creates something really special. You never know where things are going to take you. And this has been so much fun. Ash, I've had such a blast working with you on this. Kel, thanks so much for having us, and so incredibly excited to just be able to share some of our experiences with others. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, both of you, Jamie and Ash. Thanks for being here with me, for sharing your story. Before we go, just Jamie, where can people find you? Where can people follow you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I'm most active on Twitter, so at Jamie Russo. And if anyone's interested in checking out the work, jamierusso.me, that's my website.
How about you, Ash?
So you can find me at ashlamp.com, and there you'll find everything about me, my Twitter, my email. That's it.